Greetings and felicitations.
Hip hip hurrah, tally ho.
How you doing, cutie pie?
Hey Puddin'.
Star Trek Year 4, produced by IDW Comics. This was one of the first series that IDW Comics did produce back in 2007. It was a 6-part series, and we'll also discuss the prequel to it entitled Focus on Star Trek, which includes a 5-page story dealing with the effects just after the last episode of the original series.
Yeah, it mentions Janice Lister, so we know what happens right after Turnabout Intruder. And it's just Kirk, mostly, in his thoughts about how much he loves what he does.
Absolutely.
Being captain of the Enterprise.
So after the series, he's reminiscing about his involvement in different adventures. And I like the fact that the final words from Captain Kirk are, "The Enterprise is my home. Even after the fateful events of the last few weeks, I cannot conceive of doing anything else with my life. There is nothing else that gives me such purpose."
Yeah, that really sounds like Kirk. And imagine this was written in 2007, so they already knew that Kirk would later become an admiral and not be as happy and try to get his command back and everything. So this is great at showing how he felt. I think even though it was short, it was good. It was very poignant because this is the Kirk we know.
Mm-hmm. So this is writer David Tishman. We're going to see that he continues on writing this 6-part series, Year 4. And even though it's a mini-series, it's not a continuing story. Each issue has a different story. So they're essentially standalones. One could buy one issue and be self-contained.
Yeah, and you don't have to read them in order.
And we know it's the animated series era, or oftentimes the animated series is considered the 4th year by many. But it also has Lieutenant Arex and Miris in the comics.
Yeah, and it was neat to see them too.
So let's talk about issue number 1. David Tishman is the writer of the series, but this issue has art by Steve Connolly.
So they go to this, like a series of planets called the Strand, and they find this scientist who was someone that, like, Dr. McCoy has heard of. I mean, he's from Earth. He's someone that disappeared, and, well, now here he is.
Mm-hmm.
So what we find out is that he's been spending all this time doing research trying to save the life of his wife, which is a good Star Trek story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, this one had a sad ending. Everyone died at the end, and I mean, the scientist guy was not able to save his wife. She died, and he died, and there was this whole planet of misfits, misshapen people, because he had been experimenting on them.
Interesting that he makes reference to Dr. Phlox.
Yes.
So we know that Dr. Phlox made some headway in all his scientific experiments and medical experiments, enough so that 100+ years later he's being mentioned. So anytime they cross-reference different Star Treks, just little tidbits, it does make the universe more cohesive.
And we like these little throwbacks, these inferences, the references. Yeah, it's fan service, and we love it.
Issue number 2, same production team.
And this one is about trying to get dilithium crystals, another common Star Trek story. And you have this planet where you have the ones trying to negotiate with the Federation, and then the ones who are against it. It seems like the artwork in this was a lot simpler. Like there were in the background, like it was just very simple. It was all like a one-colored wall.
Both of these ones, the artist, it really wasn't to me to my liking. But we know that early on in IDW's, this is the 3rd actual comic book series that they produce in Star Trek. They were strapped. They didn't have a full art team, or at least a full art team of the caliber that we're used to. So it's understandable for an early company.
But are these comics the original printing of the comics? Because it's such thick pages. I mean, they tried to make this like a higher quality comic. Just I mean, I guess they were trying to sell it for more money or something. But it's such nicer paper and everything.
Mm-hmm. Issue number 3, I like this one much better because we have veteran Star Trek artist Gordon Purcell, and he really has an understanding of the likeness of the characters.
Yeah, this one's pretty good. It got the characters down. Yeah, and I like it where you can tell who's who. You can tell the difference between Kirk and Chekhov. I mean so that's better artwork.
Mm-hmm. And the backgrounds are fully fleshed out.
The story, it was kind of hard to follow at first, I guess. I mean, or it was just me, like, not knowing why the character. I mean, it's about the characters acting differently, and
the story starts at the end of the story, and then it jumps in. So it's like a bookend story to a degree.
And it doesn't make it clear that that's what it was doing. It doesn't say, like, this was an hour ago or something.
This is the type of story that would have benefited from multiple issues, not just crammed into one.
Yes. Well, it made good use of Nurse Chapel. I mean, I like her and how she can actually be part of a story.
Mm-hmm. And Mires makes an appearance in here. And I think that's one of the best thing about these stories that take place in year 4 is that we're seeing Mires as well as Arax as well as Chekhov. Chekhov didn't get kicked off the ship.
Yeah, he was still there, of course. Mm-hmm. Even during the first season when we didn't see him, he was probably there.
Yeah.
Right?
Issue number 4. This issue was drawn by the Sharp brothers. Again, we're looking at a very different art style. I'm not exactly sure that this fits in with Star Trek. What did you think?
The story, going to a planet where TV is important and they kind of wanted to put Kirk, Spock, and crew on a TV show. I thought it was funny. It's kind of, and you can tell they're trying to pay homage to the Saturday Night Live skit where, Belushi played Kirk.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah. And I think I saw some of Red Shirts in this too, the book by John Scalzi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's homage to those.
Yeah, this is the tongue-in-cheek issue.
Yeah, the one where you kind of like, I don't know, making fun of Star Trek itself being a TV show and having all these fans, yes.
If this was an episode, it would have that playful music that they have kind of in Shore Leave or
yeah,
you know what I mean? Issue number 5, going back to art by Steve Connolly. What did you think about this issue?
I like this one. This one was a scientific story.
Mm-hmm.
And like they had to get one of those in, which was necessary, and this one had more of the emotion too, having Spock in danger.
Mm-hmm. We saw Arax in the ready room, or they didn't call it ready room at the time.
No, they didn't.
Called it the.
What did they call? I don't know if I didn't really notice that it was supposed to be.
What do they call that?
Oh, the
Kirk's era?
Conference room.
Conference room.
Yeah.
So they had Lieutenant Arax in the conference room.
Yes.
So I like to see him involved in there. Overall, what do you think about this story?
It was interesting having, like figuring out how to do about the cloud that was formed and how to get Spock rescued from the station, and then Spock firing the phasers from the station, even though he couldn't communicate with the Enterprise. I mean, that was cool.
I think they got the characterizations down right there.
Yes.
And finally, issue number 6. We're going back to Gordon Purcell art again.
And this one also had J.K. Woodward, right? That was.
Yeah, he did. J.K. Woodward was a coloring assistant along with Mario Boone.
Okay. Oh, was he like of a lower job position in this one, and then he rose up later or something?
Oh, he had to. Sure, yeah. It took him some time, but when he got up there, he hit with a bang because his art was amazing. Coloring's beautiful. Art gives you that 60s feel.
His art reminds me of Kurt Swan's Superman era.
Oh yeah. Kurt Swan is, when you think of 60s Superman, you think of Kurt Swan. So I could see that, the way his facial features are and his body movements. He is kind of Swan-esque. And to have it in this 60s era Star Trek, it does make the perfect fit.
The robot in there didn't look three-dimensional.
It's a strange character, the robot. Let's talk about the story.
Well, what were they doing with the babies? That was DNA that they restructured and made babies out of? Is that what we're supposed to think?
It was odd, huh?
Yeah, that's
another
really
one.
odd.
I think they crammed too much information into one issue. I would have liked this to be a 2 or 3-parter.
Yes, and the woman from the Enterprise, that baby she took with her, she thinks that's her brother. Just because it had one blue eye and one brown eye?
The DNA was taken from her brother.
Yes,
that's what I got out of it. And then made into a baby.
Yeah, so now she's just going to take the baby and raise it.
Which is super awkward, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, really. That one was a strange story.
Okay, here we go. Another Star Trek comic book series, Year 4. But this one is entitled The Enterprise Experiment. 5 issues, produced by IDW Comics. Cover date for issue number 1 was April of 2008. Now here's a strange curiosity about these comics. If you're a collector or if you're thinking about buying these, you have to watch out for it because the cover says Star Trek Year 4, but in tiny, tiny little font, it says Enterprise Experiment, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, what have you. I can't imagine why they would not put the title of the series in bold letters. So if you're buying back issues of this and the original Year 4 series, you could mix up the numbering because the font of the title is so small. So you have to watch out when you're buying it that you look at that tiny, tiny little font and make sure you're getting the Enterprise Experiment series. I mean, what drew me into this initially was this is the first comic book ever written by Dorothy Fontana.
So you were expecting a good story.
I love Dorothy Fontana. I mean, when I was a kid, when I saw written by DC Fontana on the screen, I would take note. I said, these are my favorite episodes.
Yeah, she wrote some of the best Star Trek episodes and, Spock episodes.
Of course, she helped develop what we know as the Vulcan culture. All right, so this series is written by Dorothy Fontana, also by Derek Chester. They co-wrote it, with artwork by Gordon Purcell. And we know Gordon Purcell for his work on
the DC Comics Star Trek series.
I love his likenesses, because it's not easy. All artists can't get down the characteristics of Spock, Kirk, McCoy, and the rest of the gang. He really understands what their facial features should be.
Yeah, the faces in this are really good. I mean, everything looks just like them. Their facial expressions, too.
We're going on with the 4th season, which essentially is what we know the animated series. So we could expect characters like Mires.
And RX.
Of course. I like seeing him in here.
And it was very interesting. So we're looking at this first issue, and they claim RX is a telepath, which we didn't know.
Never got any of that information before. And DC Fontana, since she put her hands on this, she has some involvement in this. Hey, it's not canon technically, but with her imagination and her amazing understanding and she has already done with the Star Trek universe, I'm going with it.
And because she also helped develop the animated series, and so here she is using a Rex in the story a lot. So
yes,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I really like that. It follows up the events of
the 3rd season episode, Enterprise Incident, where they stole a cloaking device.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what we have in this series, and what we learned in the first issue, they're trying to see how well the cloaking device works on the Enterprise.
Exactly. This is something that we've wondered about. And
so they hook it up, and what happens was it cloaked and phased the ship, which is interesting. You know that's something that happened on TNG, and this book was, this comic book was written way after all of TNG. So, so in some ways it was a copy of that. Very reminiscent. And it has throwback to the Tholian web as well. Yes, but they're basically finding out that the cloak isn't working because it's not working right because they can't seem to uncloak when they want to. And it is also causing a type of madness that happened in the Tholian web. And I kind of thought this issue it had a little too much technobabble for me. I thought it got too
heavy
technical.
on technobabble. And the subsequent issues, we're seeing that, at least I got the impression that this should have been more of an ongoing series or a longer series. There was too much information crammed into 5 issues. Some of it almost seemed disjointed. And I think part of it was maybe Dorothy Fontana is not used to writing for the comic book format, but she had a co-writer with her. That's the best way. It's not so much bad, but it just some of the scene changes were really jarring on it.
Like with the one we talked about at the beginning of issue 2, where they have Spock and Sarek aboard the Romulan commander ship. Now remember, the Romulan commander from Star Trek, from the Enterprise incident, the female.
What's her name? The fan name that was created for her?
Well, that's something else too. So they don't say her name in this comic. Liviana Charvanek. Yeah,
Charvanek. Now, in fandom, oftentimes she is referred to as Commander Charvanek.
Yes, they did. They called her that in Star Trek Continues. I remember that. But also in some of the novels.
Exactly, and even in the HeroClix figurines, they called her Commander Charvanek.
So they gave her a name.
It is. So it's an unofficial name. I always like it when they throw things like that in. They didn't put it in this issue. I mean, that's a nitpick.
It's okay. The thing is, in this issue, they mentioned about her name though. They said it's something like when she said, "My name is mine only." I mean, and that fits too, because in the episode she whispered her name to Spock. She didn't say it out loud, and no one else said her name.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, that was good. But the fact that we have Romulans, we're rolling into Klingons, there was so much going on in this series.
And that's what happened. So at the beginning of issue 2, where they have her and Sarek is aboard her ship too, and they're saying he was there as part of a negotiation or something. But the thing is, like, it wasn't really mentioned again until something about Sarek was mentioned again later, like at the last issue.
It was almost like a passive comment.
Yeah, it was very strange. Yeah, that scene was just thrown in for no reason.
Which makes me wonder if they plotted out much more to this, but they had to trim some things for the sake of page count.
Yeah, and I was wondering if they didn't do this kind of hurriedly for some reason because they had a quick publication date and had to make too many changes or something.
Who knows? Yeah, could be. We have Sulu disguising himself as a Klingon. Do you think he pulled it off?
I think in the comic pictures, I think he looked convincing in these comics. In the real world, I don't know if they had tried to make up Sulu as a Klingon, I don't know if it would have worked or not.
But I was glad to see Sulu get more into the action in these comics.
And actually, in one of the novels, Sulu was made up to look like a Romulan as well. So he was the one that they liked to change into an alien and send on these covert missions.
In these issues, we have a reference to preserver technology.
Yes, and that they mentioned them, and that was when, like, the story kind of got a little better when it got into more of that. They showed the obelisk and trying to figure out again what it was. I mean, it looked like they had to do more work to translate the symbols this time, even though Spock had already translated the symbols on the other obelisk, but this one was different. And it was interesting having the Klingons wanted to steal that, the device from the Paradise Syndrome, the device that had erased Kirk's mind. The Klingons wanted to steal that because they thought it would be something they could use. And, that was a neat idea because, I mean, yeah, that does sound in character with the Klingons.
Kor makes an appearance, speaking of Klingons, but this is the point that I'm trying to make, is that there's too many references to too many episodes, too many characters. I felt it was just so crammed in. Like, I was expecting so much more out of the read, and the big disappointment was it was only 5 issues. Whereas the story could have taken much longer and it could have been paced out more evenly.
Yeah, there are some things about it, and like I said, this one was not very memorable. A lot of it, I mean,
it really wasn't, sad to say.
Comic. One of the things it had was Kirk thinking about Carol Marcus.
I love that reference.
And it also has McCoy with Joanna.
Mm-hmm. Tons of fan service in here.
And it has Spock remembering his cousin
as mentioned in there are some quotes from Yesteryear, which DC Fontana wrote, but I noticed that there were quotes there that Spock, young Spock heard his cousin say this, and his cousin was older Spock. So I'm saying it had all these character moments with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, with their, family and things, that was close to them. So that part was good. That's something that DC Fontana is good at, having these character moments like that.
So when we walk away from reading this, how do we think it fits in to the narrative that we know of the animated series, which essentially is the Year 4 mission?
I mean, it can still fit in there somewhere, but it's still disjointed, like you said. So it's kind of hard to make it part of your head canon because it's not all clear.
I think the high point for me are the moments with Arex, because it's a character that wasn't developed enough in the animated series. So knowing that he has some superior mental abilities, I think makes it pretty cool.
And I believe like he was used more in Peter David's New Frontier books, or not him, but one of his race. So I mean, so he does get developed more in other places. And I do like that they explained the Galactic Barrier in this, saying that.
And they used the same map that they did in Balance of Terror.
Yes.
Did you notice that?
I did. Well, they showed that. Yeah, that was neat. So yeah, these little things thrown in that, like, if you're familiar enough with the show, you remember all of these things. So the Galactic Barrier was explained as being something to sort of keep people in for a time, but they knew that people would probably someday develop the technology to get out of that. But it was just something to keep you here and keep you safe until you do develop that technology, because you would probably be more advanced as a species. Once you have the technology, you would also have the social structure to not go out just to conquer. And so it was put there by the preservers for that. And Aelborn from the Errand of Mercy episode.
Just too many episode references. I mean, it's just like the more and more we flip through these, we're like, it's every other page.
But they do try to explain, because people have always wondered, okay, how come the Organians haven't been interfering with the Federation and the Klingons? Because they said that they were going to keep the Federation and Klingons from fighting. So so these comics try to say that the Organians just, decided they didn't want to anymore, basically. They just weren't going to get involved anymore. Like the humans and Klingons fight it out. At least it's an answer.
It's at least that's an answer. We both agreed that the second half of the series was better than the first half, and it's because we actually get some answers to questions that came up when we watched the original series.
Yes, it tried to address that at least. And they did say in the fifth and last issue that Sarek had been a prisoner of the Romulans. But that was after Sarek was back on Vulcan, and you don't really know how he got back to Vulcan, but no.
And they showed Sarek in robes, and the robes were very reminiscent of the outfit that he wore in Journey to Babel.
Yes.
So they had a visual connection there, because we know that the Romulans wear robes in the Next Generation era. So I think they were trying to give us an upgrade in the clothing styles, or going into that direction to say Vulcan culture.
Yeah, it looked like they were trying to progress it, because it was we've already seen what's going to happen to them after this.
And motion picture, we see the Vulcans wear robes in the motion picture as well. So it's kind of leaning towards that direction, which I enjoyed. And
Admiral Negora is in these comics, but he's in command of a ship in this one.
Makes sense.
Yes. And Negora was mentioned in the motion picture. He was the one in charge of Starfleet at that time.
Yes.
So in this story, but it does say that he made a deal with the female Romulan commander. So he was somehow he had been working with her covertly, and that was, I think it kind of ended there where they didn't explain it. They were thinking maybe they would come back and address that later.
Apparently these comics did not sell that well. Just over 10,000 copies. Again, if it was a longer series or it was a regular series, I would like it more, instead of just cramming so much information in and giving us a cliffhanger like that. This has never been addressed, but we'll take it for what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you, it could be an interesting story if you're interested in all these things we mentioned and the things they brought up and explained. It had some moments, but overall, not up to par, really.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.